Today, we're going over the absolute best way to train your rear delts because most people, they don't have them. It's flat. There's also a lot of bad advice out there because people will say, hey, just do high elbow rows to target your rear delts. And I like where your head's at. That's a neat idea, but it's dumb. Because if you look at scapular kinematics, you'll realize that to effectively target those mid-traps and rhomboids, you need to retract your scaps. You want to hit the rear delts, you actually have to depress and slightly protract. So don't do that. So let's walk through the best way to train those posterior delts. And the key to understanding how to best train any muscle is to first identify its primary actions. In this case, it's shoulder extension, horizontal shoulder abduction, and to a lesser extent, external rotation. But there's actually a way to get it more involved in external rotation, which we'll go into later. You'll also notice on every exercise I show, there's going to be a little rep range at the bottom. That's just my recommendation on what I feel is the perfect balance between overloading, but also keeping the rear delt as the primary driver. You can do whatever the hell you want. Probably call this something like Posterior Delt Masterclass, but I don't like that. How to unfuck your life, the Posterior Delts edition. I would say exercises that are predominantly shoulder extension are what most people should stick to. Can you screw these up? Yeah. If you really suck at life, you could. The two bastards you need to worry about are the lat and the teres major. Their contribution to shoulder extension torque is greatest when the arm is elevated and often increases when the shoulder is internally rotated. Hence why one arm rows feel phenomenal because it checks all the boxes. Now, if we want to make sure those greedy bastards are less involved in any sort of shoulder extension movement and it's primarily driven by the rear delt, then we have to do two things. The first thing is keeping that arm as straight as possible. The moment you start to bend the elbow, you're decreasing the external torque on the shoulder. The second thing, and most important, because this is where everybody eats a dick on this exercise, makes a mistake, is that when they contract up, they keep their arms too close to their body. A good rule of thumb to follow and a way to check in on your form is that as you approach the top of the contraction, your shoulder should be abducted at least 30 degrees. That's going to decrease the mechanical advantage of the lats, and like we said, make it all that stupid flat muscle you have back there. The last thing you got to do, which will remain true for every single exercise I show you today, is make sure you depress and protract your scaps, because this is a very different exercise than this, because the other one, that one sucks. Don't do that. And I know, easier said than done for most people because controlling your scaps is almost like a party trick. Some people can do it. You ask them to flare their lats, no problem. Others, you have no idea what's going on back there. The best cue I can give you is to push out your lat and externally rotate your shoulder. Even if you did that right now as you're watching this taking a shit, you should feel a ball of pain and discomfort well up in your rear delt. That's how you want to finish every single exercise that falls into this shoulder extension category. And if this is something you're struggling with, stick with the unilateral movements first and then ease into the bilateral ones. I should probably give a definition because that confuses some people. That's the ones where you do both. So if I had to list out some of my favorite and what I consider the best exercises in this category, it would start out with incline dumbbell rear delt raises. The single arm cable where you cross your midline, even though that's kind of a hybrid butt baby because it's also a horizontal shoulder abduction, but I put it in this category. The dual cable version. The one you can do on the seated machine side lateral because it's hard to screw up. All you really have to do is just position your body correctly and it creates that little bit of shoulder abduction and you're golden. And single arm dumbbell raises because you can go extremely heavy on these and still surprisingly keep it in that posterior delt. You'll notice on a lot of these, I'm using or finishing the movement with the supinated grip. And that's because supination can encourage glenohumeral external rotation, but it doesn't guarantee it. You can easily just twist the wrist and jack shit happens above that point. So make sure you're using it as a way to pull yourself into shoulder external rotation, because again, it's another thing that helps bias the posterior delt on movements like this. Again, you don't have to, but if your posterior delts look like dilapidated balls, then it's worth a shot. There's another exercise I've been doing recently, and I'm hesitant to even show you because it falls into that category of over-optimization, and That's all I see on my feed nowadays. Like this kid right here. What? Why? What are we doing? To me, this is like the fitness equivalent to the lady who goes to different stores and looks for the color purple. And that's not a slight against her. I'm a big fan. In fact, in the spirit, I just don't understand how we've got to this place. If you do want to try it, the setup is supinated palms in the scapular plane. When you pull, don't pull towards your body. You're actually going to pull into that shoulder abduct at least 30 degrees and force external rotation at the bottom. And it's great, but again, it's a lot. And you're probably going to screw it up. All right, next up, let's talk horizontal shoulder abduction. Because this is where I see most of the mistakes. Now, there are some people that respond really well to the classic grip it and rip it, but I would assume that's not you, because why would you be watching this in the first place if you had really developed posterior delts? That's a waste of your time. You should be doing something else. Go learn sign language. I don't give a shit. The problem with that form, or lack thereof, is it promotes scapular retraction. And then again, we're not trying to train our mid-traps or rhomboids, so let me give you some variations that I do instead that I think are a lot better. First one, I don't really have a name for it, but I just tell people when they initiate the movement, you're going to push, so punch forward, and then pull into your rear delt. I know that's not the most helpful, but I'll explain more. The idea being is that push isolates the rear delt, and you continue to drive away until you get about halfway in the movement. At that halfway point, you stop pushing forward and start pulling back into your rear delt as you protract your scap. I don't know if this is gonna help because there's a lot of hair on my back, but as you can see, I'm driving away and then pulling into that rear delt, and still my mid-trap's relatively relaxed in compared to this, which now I feel all in my neck. Another one I like to do is a single arm across the body. Now, I've seen people do it where they keep a bent arm and really wrap around. I don't like that. The way I like to do it is by driving away the entire time and letting that fully contracted rear delt dictate when the movement stops. You should feel like you're pulling on an upward angle. I would say my go-to exercise in this category is one that I made a short on, and I made it because I couldn't figure out why it was so effective, and then I found this study where they did an axillary nerve block, which affects the deltoid and the teres minor, and what they found is when your shoulder's abducted at 90 degrees, it's responsible, the teres minor and the posterior delt, for up to 50% of external rotation. Which one is it more? I don't know, but if you pair that with these other studies, the posterior delt is definitely involved in external rotation as that arm elevates. I don't know, I'm trying to prove this to you. It's probably because some of you guys are fucks. The more you know. Magic School Boss. If you haven't seen it before, basically you're gonna flare your elbows out, almost feel like you're forcing internal rotation, start horizontal shoulder abduction, and as you get about halfway, drop those elbows and force external rotation. Yeah, it looks awful, but it feels great. And after a certain amount of size, nobody says anything. What are they gonna say? I did have an old lady one time come up to the gym as I was doing these and say, "Can you show me how to do it like that?" And I had to say nicely, "No, you old bitch." I didn't say that. And that's why I started learning sign language. I've had several people comment and say, "Why don't you like the Jay Cutler high rear delt flies? Because if it's good enough for Jay, it's obviously good enough for us." But if you've seen Jay Cutler at 19 years old, I don't look like that now. I don't have those genetics. I have whatever this is. I have those shitty genetics and clothes. For me personally, it's just a really trap dominant movement. There is, however, another variation I do that's very similar, but it requires a bench, so you're gonna take up even more space and equipment at the gym, and people will hate you that much more. But like I said, I think it's better. All the bench is really doing is giving you that kinesthetic feedback so you can pin your scapulae against it so your traps are less involved, and it's all rear delt. From there, you can either do the traditional horizontal shoulder abduction, or you can add a little bit external rotation as you go through the movement. And if you want to mimic that same Jay Cutler high angle rear delt fly, then just put the bench up even higher. It's just a bench and a small tweak, but it makes a big difference because it keeps you from screwing it up. Let me finish off by saying that I am a fan of doing a row for your rear delt, but it needs to be very specific when it comes to form. You can't just throw your elbows nice and high and expect good things to happen. And based upon the people that watch this channel, it's 25 to 45, male, white, can't dance. Probably the first time they tug themselves, whatever hand they use, that's the hand they use for life. Basically what I'm saying is it takes a lot of coordination and I don't have faith in it. So pay close attention. The way I set it up is it's always a unilateral movement. That way I can turn into the working side and then I'm pulling across and away from my body with my shoulder abducted at roughly 60 degrees. And most importantly, if you look from the back, that scap is slightly depressed and protracted. I told you it was a lot of shit. Hopefully that helps. I know I'm very snarky, but I genuinely care about being able to effectively teach things that have been a real game changer for me. It's hard online. It's so much easier in person where you can manipulate form and touch and maybe not touch. I don't want to touch any of you. Either way, what this made me realize is the next program needs to be a body part specific one. That way I can go over all the little nuances and also just give you exactly what I would do to fix a small and embarrassing muscle. But in the meantime, if you haven't bought the strength and hypertrophy program, it's phenomenal and it's $20. Get after it.